The Justice Department has instructed the IRS to hand over former President Trump's tax returns to Congress. The DOJ Office of Legal Counsel issued a 39-page opinion Friday, reversing the previous administration's position that had kept the tax records under wraps. A federal judge said that Mr. Trump and his lawyers have until Wednesday to issue a response. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. Let us talk, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us this morning. So they have until Wednesday to challenge the order. Is there anything Donald Trump and his lawyers can do to stop this?
I really don't think that they have a valid legal argument here. That doesn't mean that they won't try. I'm sure they will. One thing that's important to recognize about this case is this isn't a subpoena from Congress. This is actually a statutory right that this committee has to have this access to this information. And this has gone back for practically a century. So it really isn't a close case. It seems to me that ultimately Congress will get a hold of these records. It may take a little while because it'll have to go through the courts, but I don't think that Trump or his lawyers will have an argument that will ultimately persuade a court.
So Donald Trump has already been forced or told that he needs to turn over his tax returns to the Manhattan DA. What's different here? What is Congress hoping to find?
So that investigation is different in that it's a criminal probe, and this is not. It's a congressional oversight action. And so they aren't necessarily looking for criminal activity. I mean, if they found it, if they stumbled over it, I'm sure that they would do something with it. But what they're looking for is pertinent to their role as oversight committee, looking over the executive branch. And so more of interest to them is potential conflicts of interest that the president might have had, and foreign influence over the president's policymaking authority during his presidency. All of those things might lead to potential changes in legislation or policy that might prevent this from happening in the future. I mean, this was really our first president who had such intricate and extensive financial entanglements. And so it's kind of was custom that presidents turned over their tax returns. But perhaps Congress wants to act in order to make sure that we don't have these problems in the future.
So we know that Judge Trevor McFadden is a Trump appointee. I don't know if that's going to make a difference moving forward.
It shouldn't. And, it's really worth noting, I think that a lot of lawmakers and commentators on both sides of the aisle have made it seem like judges are beholden to the individual who appoints that person. And that's really not the way it works. We have a judiciary that's professional, and they approach their job professionally. Now, that's not to say that, the ideological background of this judge isn't relevant, particularly Republican-leaning judges or judges that would be appealing to Republican politicians tend to favor more executive power. And so in that regard, he might approach this case in a way that's very protective of the presidency itself. And that's different from being protective of Donald Trump. And I think in this instance, especially because Donald Trump is no longer president, that won't sway the outcome of the case.
So if, the best way to predict the future is to take a look at past behavior, I expect that, the former president and his attorneys will kind of do whatever they can to kind of frustrate this process moving forward. So in terms of a realistic timeline, when could Congress realistically get its hands on former president's tax returns, on the former president?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right that, at this point, as I was saying before, I don't think that there's much of a way that they can that the president and his lawyers can frustrate Congress here, or the committee and its oversight capacities. But I do think that they can delay. How long that delay takes, it really depends on how quickly this moves through the court. So it's not entirely clear to me, but there could be a fairly significant delay here, and that's part of the president's MO is to just kind of gum up the works. And so, my guess is that it may be, we may not see this for many months, probably not up until a year, but could be.
Wow. Okay, so what was the DOJ's legal reasoning for reversing the previous administration's position that Donald Trump's tax returns could be kept from Congress? And I'm wondering if the fact that he's no longer the president was something that was factored in.
Oh, absolutely it was. I mean, one thing to keep in mind, it is a little strange. I mean, DOJ usually protects the prerogatives of the presidency itself, and that often includes, as we've seen, protecting former presidents and, things that the new administration may not be particularly sympathetic with, but the Department of Justice as an institution tends to protect executive prerogatives. So this is a change in that they're reversing their position, and they're also favoring Congress, right, and not favoring the executive. So that's something to note. And I think, a lot of people are, wondering why would they do that? Why would they change course and not be super protective of the executive? One of the reasons is the one that you just mentioned, which is he's no longer the president. So part of the reasoning in the last go around was, look, what would happen if a congressional committee just wanted to totally hamper a president in his duties? And it could be something akin to what the president likes to say, kind of presidential harassment. And so there is some legitimate concerns behind that allegation, which is we do need a functioning president who can do his job. But here, we no longer have a president. He's no longer president. So that concern completely drops out. The second legal point that the first opinion, the Trump administration DOJ opinion stated was, look, we don't believe that the congressional committee here has a legitimate legislative purpose. We're going to really look at this, look at what individual Congress members have said, and we think they're lying. We think this is pretext. We think they really just want these taxes to go after a political enemy, expose him, embarrass him. And what the new DOJ said is that's inappropriate. As co-equal branches of government, we have to owe some deference to each other. And we don't do that kind of searching sort of inquiry about legislative intent. If there is a legitimate potential interest in getting these documents, we as the executive need to respect that on behalf of the Congress, just the way courts would respect the executive statement of what its interests are. So unless it's obviously pretext, we have to defer to it. So those two reasons together led the current DOJ to reverse its position. Not a normal thing, but not unprecedented.
Rebecca Roiphe, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie.